Eye on Culture is sponsored by the Ignatovich Family Foundation.
Eye on Culture.
In 1926, during a concert in Kyiv, Borys Liatoshynsky's Symphony No. 1 was played 8 years after it was written. The audience probably felt that they were witnessing history, the true beginning of high-caliber symphonic music in Ukraine. Of course, Liatoshynsky's symphony was not the first symphonic work in Ukrainian music. Music lovers of the time knew that before him, at the end of the 1780s, Dmytro Butnyansky wrote his Concerto Symphony, which was for a long time considered the first symphonic work in the Russian Empire. Today, we know that still earlier, his Ukrainian countryman Maxim Berezovsky wrote at least 11 symphonies in classical style, because the musical score of one of them was recently discovered. In the 19th century, symphonic overtures in Romantic style were written by Mikhailo Verbitsky, a composer from Galicia in western Ukraine, and the author of the music of Ukraine's national anthem. In addition, symphonic music was written by Mykola Lysenko, as well as by a largely forgotten composer, Volodymyr Sokolsky. Mikhailo Kolochevsky composed the melodic Ukrainian Symphony. In addition, there was the Ukrainian Symphony by Czech composer Arnošt Vančura, which is so deeply rooted in Ukrainian musical folklore that many people consider it not only to be part of the Czech music tradition, but the Ukrainian as well. Similarly, there is Symphony No. 2, The Little Russian, by Petr Tchaikovsky, who himself was descended from the Ukrainian Cossack Chaika family. However, Liatoshynsky's Symphony No. 1 was really the first example of world-class Ukrainian symphonic music, even though this was the work of a very young composer, written still in 1918 in war-torn Kyiv, a city in the throes of revolution. This work shows definite influences and stylistic borrowings, dramatism in the style of Richard Wagner, the elaborate musical architectonics of Gustav Mahler, and melodic structures in the style of Alexander Scriabin. At the same time, this is a sovereign piece on a par with European symphonic works of the day. At the time that Liatoshynsky wrote his first symphony, he was a student at the Kyiv Conservatory in the class of renowned educator and composer Reinhold Glier, a Frenchman born in Kyiv. Glier recognized and very much appreciated Liatoshynsky's extraordinary musical talent, and became so close with his pupil that they remained very good friends throughout their lives. And from the voluminous correspondence between them, recently discovered and published by musicologist Marianna Kupitsa, we now have invaluable information about the ideas, works, and difficult fates of both Liatoshynsky and Glier. Glier, in fact, was the first to perform Liatoshynsky's symphony. He was the conductor of that 1926 concert mentioned earlier. That concert was the only time that Liatoshynsky was ever able to hear his Symphony No. 1 performed, as fate would have it, or rather by the design of a totalitarian regime, which for decades suppressed or banned Liatoshynsky's works. And this was regardless of the fact that Liatoshynsky was the first Ukrainian composer who could justifiably be considered a leading figure in world music at the time. He was an accomplished composer of instrumental and vocal works, but his genius and special talents were manifested with particular brilliance in the sphere of symphonic music. The fact that Liatoshynsky is still not very well known throughout the world is a result of his music being silenced by the totalitarian regime in the USSR, and because of the reality pertaining in Ukraine today, where the government and population are, unfortunately, rather lackluster in propagating widely the best examples of their own cultural tradition. The historical circumstances surrounding all 5 of Liatoshynsky's remarkable symphonies were marred by difficulties. His second symphony, composed in 1938, was banned by the Stalinist regime on the charge of being against the people and against the state, and thus was never performed in the composer's lifetime. Liatoshynsky's tragic third symphony, written in 1948, was so heavily criticized by the Communist Party that he was forced to write a second version, changing the tragic finale to an optimistic ending, in keeping with the dogmas of socialist realism. In general, from the beginning of the 1930s up until the 1960s, Liatoshynsky was perhaps the Ukrainian composer most criticized by party censors. His works were repeatedly subjected to intense party scrutiny in kangaroo courts that could easily have ended grievously with his exile or execution. The composer was attacked for being reactionary and anti-Soviet, and his works were banned or simply never performed. This constant persecution so oppressed Liatoshynsky that in one of his letters to Glier, he expressed that he felt dead as a composer and didn't know if he would ever experience a rebirth. But still, in spite of the pressure and attacks, he did not succumb. He did not make any compromises in his music. He did not dumb down his works to be on a par with the officially approved socialist realism. His next symphonies, number 4 and number 5, were only proof of his development as an artist. He also penned a number of symphonic poems, continued to write chamber music and works for piano and other instruments, and wrote 2 operas. And in the cultural life of KU, among aficionados of music, Liatoshynsky's authority achieved cult status. For many, he was the living symbol of the unvanquished spirit of Ukrainian music. In addition, Liatoshynsky was perhaps the most influential musical educator in Ukraine. He was a professor of composition who encouraged his students to pursue new directions in musical art, and who educated many of Ukraine's most important contemporary composers, such as Leonid Hrabovsky, Valentin Silvestrov, Lesia Dychko, Yevhen Stankovich, and Ivan Karabits, and the list goes on. In fact, it was his students who, in the 1960s, formed the innovative group KU Avant-Garde. In the 1990s, after Ukraine achieved independence, Liatoshynsky's works became better known in world culture. In 1994, the National Symphony Orchestra of Ukraine, conducted by American-Ukrainian Theodore Kuchar, recorded Liatoshynsky's 5 symphonies and the symphonic poem Grazhina for a CD set produced by the American company Marko. This CD achieved international recognition as the best of the year. More recently, this orchestra, under the direction of Volodymyr Sirenko, made a new recording of all 5 of Liatoshynsky's symphonies, with Symphony No. 3 in its original unrevised version. We can also witness the continuation of and expansion on Liatoshynsky's musical traditions in the works of his very talented students, some of whom, like Valentin Silvestrov, have achieved worldwide renown. But we will hear more about Silvestrov and another notable composer educated by Liatoshynsky, Leonid Hrabovsky, another time. On behalf of Dr. Marko Robert Stech, I'm Tania Stech. See you next time on Eye on Culture.
Очима культури спонсороване фундацією родини Ігнатович.
Очима культури.